Hi everybody. Welcome back to Learner Attraction. In the previous lesson, we focused on defining relative clauses, and today, we're going to look at non-defining relative clauses. Non-defining relative clauses are placed after nouns which are definite already. They do not therefore define the noun, but merely add something to it by giving some more information about it. They are not essential in the sentence, and can be omitted without causing confusion. They are separated from the rest of the sentence by commas in writing, and by pauses in speech. For example, Dorothy, who cuts my hair, has moved to another hairdresser's. Bill, whom we saw at the dance, wants to go out with me. Bernard Shaw, who had a long beard, was a very clever writer. Grammar, which I dislike very much, is good for me. This is Jim, whose father is a doctor. My mother, who is 89 years old, goes swimming every morning. Air, which we breathe, is made up of many gases. This house, which was built 25 years ago, belongs to my uncle. This desk, which I bought second-hand, is made of oak. That well, which they began digging on Monday, is now 10 meters deep. Relative pronouns used in non-defining relative clauses.
For people, nominative, who. Objective, whom, or who. Possessive, whose. For things, nominative, which. Objective, which. Possessive, of which, or whose. For animals, nominative, which, or who. Objective, which, or whom. Possessive, whose.
Who is the only subject relative pronoun for people. Whom is the correct object relative pronoun, though, who is sometimes used instead of whom in conversation. My wife, who is a doctor, has decided to visit China next month. Our new neighbors, who have come here from Bandung, are very friendly. My gardener, who is very pessimistic, says that there will be no apples this year. Tim and Helen, who are playing tennis, are my cousins. My sister, whom you met yesterday, wants to see you. Or, my sister, who you met yesterday, wants to see you. Whom is the object of met in the relative clause. In conversation, it can be replaced by who. Objective relative pronouns cannot be omitted in non-defining clauses. My wife's mother, whom I haven't seen for years, is coming for a visit tomorrow. The tall man in the raincoat, whom nobody recognized, turned out to be Helen's first husband. Miss Smith, whom you met at the party last night, is going to marry her boss. The preposition is normally placed before whom, though it is possible in conversation to use whom or who and move the preposition to the end of the clause. For example, Tom, with whom I drove home yesterday, is leaving for Jakarta tomorrow. Becomes Tom, whom I drove home with yesterday, is leaving for Jakarta tomorrow. Or Tom, who I drove home with yesterday, is leaving for Jakarta tomorrow. My wife, to whom you were speaking just now, wants you to come to dinner. My wife, whom you were speaking to just now, wants you to come to dinner. My wife, who you were speaking to just now, wants you to come to dinner. Jack, from whom I bought this car, is moving to Paris. Jack, whom I bought this car from, is moving to Paris. Jack, who I bought this car from, is moving to Paris. My sister, to whom you were talking on the phone, graduated in physics from Cambridge University last year. My sister, whom you were talking to on the phone, graduated in physics from Cambridge University last year. My sister, who you were talking to on the phone, graduated in physics from Cambridge University last year. Note that, in non-defining clauses, object-relative pronouns are never omitted. Which is used for things or animals and as the subject or object. For example, his new house, which is absolutely enormous, has no running water. This house, which is to be sold by auction next month, belongs to my uncle. Whiskey, which is very expensive, is the national drink of Scotland. Smoking, which is known to be harmful to people, is nevertheless popular. Smallpox, which once killed thousands of people every year, has now been wiped out. This dog, which barks at strangers, never bites. Air, which we breathe, is made up of many gases. Grass, which cows and horses love, is always green in Indonesia. These apple trees, which I planted 3 years ago, have not yet borne any fruit. This desk, which I bought second-hand, cost $1,000. Note that, if an animal is named, it is thought of as a person. So you can say, our dog Jackie, who had been lost for 5 days, was found and brought home by a policeman. My dog, whom I call Charlie, is very smart. When which is used as the object of a preposition, it is usually preceded by the preposition. In conversational English, it is possible to move the preposition to the end of the clause. For example, this book, for which I paid $10, is very interesting. Becomes, this book, which I paid $10 for, is very interesting. That house, in which he lives, was built 50 years ago. That house, which he lives in, was built 50 years ago. This store, at which he buys most of his books, is the largest in town. This store, which he buys most of his books at, is the largest in town. Note that the relative pronoun that cannot be used in non-defining clauses. For example, this house, which is to be sold by auction next month, was built 30 years ago. Don't say, this house, that is to be sold by auction next month, was built 30 years ago. My sister, whom or who you met yesterday, wants to see you. Don't say, my sister, that you met yesterday, wants to see you. Whose is a relative possessive word. It is used together with nouns in the same way as his, her, their, or its. Instead of whose, of which, can be used to refer to things, and it is usually preferred. For example, this is Elizabeth, whose father you met last week. Mr. Carson, whose car I borrowed for this journey, is a doctor. My dog, whose temper is very uncertain, often bites the judges at important dog shows. In Wasdale there is a mysterious dark lake, whose depth has never been measured. His thesis, of which the last 100 pages are absolute nonsense, will probably win him a lot of notoriety. This book, of which the cover is torn, belongs to my teacher. Sentences like these are avoided wherever possible, and it would be more usual to say, my dog has a very uncertain temper and often bites judges at important dog shows. His thesis will probably win him a lot of notoriety because the last 100 pages are absolute nonsense. Compare the following sentences. I have a brother, who is a doctor. I have only one brother, and he is a doctor. It's a non-defining clause. I have a brother who is a doctor. I have more than one brother, and one of them is a doctor. It's a defining clause. All the villagers, who had heard of the man-eating tiger, hurried home and locked themselves in. This sentence implies that all the villagers had heard of the man-eating tiger. It's a non-defining clause. All the villagers who had heard of the man-eating tiger hurried home and locked themselves in. This sentence tells us that only the villagers who had heard of the man-eating tiger hurried home and locked themselves in, and implies that there were other villagers who had not heard of the man-eating tiger. It's a defining clause. Note that non-defining relative clauses are separated from the rest of the sentence by commas in writing, and by pauses in speech, while defining relative clauses are written without commas. Non-defining relative clauses are usually avoided in spoken English by using simple sentences. Compare. That well, which they began digging on Monday, is now 10 meters deep. They began digging that well on Monday. It is 10 meters deep now. My sister Alice, whom you saw yesterday, is coming to dinner. You remember you saw my sister Alice yesterday? Well, she's coming to dinner. My father, whom you met at the party yesterday, is a well-known author. My father is a well-known author. You met him at the party yesterday, you know. Non-defining relative clauses are not common in conversational English. They are more usual in formal speech and writing, except for the following two types. 1. Which is used when the antecedent is a whole sentence. My brother used to be fond of boxing, which accounts for his crooked nose. Means the same as my brother used to be fond of boxing, and that accounts for his crooked nose. It was raining hard, which kept us indoors. Means the same as it was raining hard, and this kept us indoors. He said he had lost his cell phone, which was untrue. He said he had lost his cell phone, but this was untrue. He's passed the test on his first try, which is fantastic. He's passed the test on his first try, and this is fantastic. He tore up my photo, which upset me. Rats ran about the attic all night, which kept her awake. That woman next door's always complaining, which is very annoying. One of the boys kept laughing, which annoyed me intensely. Alice went out with John, which made Paul very angry. He missed the train, which annoyed him very much. Note that the clause may occasionally precede the sentence to which it refers. Moreover, which you may hardly believe, the examiners had decided in advance to fail half the candidates. Two. In the following clauses, the relative pronoun is used as a connective, and it can be replaced by and he, and they, etc., thus turning the non-defining clause into a coordinate clause. Compare. I met Mary, who gave me this. I met Mary and she gave me this. I bought this map, which helped me a lot. I bought this map and it helped me a lot. It crashed into a busload of children, who were all killed, or, all of whom were killed. It crashed into a busload of children and they were all killed. Or, and all of them were killed. The relative adverbs, when and where, can also be used in non-defining relative clauses. For example, we will put off the picnic until next week, when the weather may be better. Finland, where my parents live, has lots of lakes. I'm planning to move to Jakarta, where I have some friends and relatives. Now, do this exercise. Directions: for each question, there are 4 choices, and only one of them is correct. Write down the correct answers on a piece of paper. You have 2 minutes to complete this exercise. Check your answers. Question number 1. D. For which? This book, for which I paid $10, is very interesting. Question number 2. B. Which? This dog, which barks at strangers, never bites. Question number 3. C. Which? Rats ran about the attic all night, which kept me awake. Question number 4. B. Who? Alice, who cuts my hair, has moved to another hairdresser's. Question number 5. D. Whose? Mr. Carson, whose car I borrowed for this journey, is a doctor. Question number 6. A. Whom? My sister, whom you met yesterday, wants to see you. Question number 7. B. In which? That house, in which he lives, was built 50 years ago. Question number 8. C. Which? This desk, which I bought second-hand, is made of wood. Question number 9. A. Who? My dog Jackie, who wakes me up every morning, can play the piano. Question number 10. A. To whom? My wife, to whom you were speaking just now, wants you to come to dinner. Well, that's the end of this lesson. If you like this video lesson, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. As always, thanks for watching.